Testing, testing. Very good. I'm not sure if the music stops automatically or if it's going to be in the background the whole time. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Hopefully there'll be a few more people coming in after afternoon tea. This is the flood forecasting and data insights stream, which I'm very excited about, and that's the whole reason I chose to chair it, because I thought I'd be coming here anyway. So you've made a great decision. So we've got a series of 3 presentations in the flood forecasting and flood insights spectrum as well. And the first one is called Development and Implementation of an Integrated Flash Flood Warning System Service, which is Nicolae Popescu from the University of Brașov in Transylvania. You've got to be kind to him as well, because he's just got off a flight yesterday, so there's a bit of jet lag, I'm sure. Nicolae has a PhD in civil engineering, and he has authored multiple peer-reviewed articles on flood hazard evaluation, GIS-based and accessibility, and flood impact mitigation. And his work combines hydrological risk assessment, hydraulic modelling, and GIS methods to inform disaster resilience planning. Cool.
Okay.
Just do a check on there if you like. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So, Kira ora. My name is Cristian, Nicolae Popescu. I'm from Romania. I just arrived yesterday morning here, so if now it's 4 p.m. here, it's 9 a.m. in my country, so it's a bit of a jet lag. I learned many things throughout the day, one of them being that you have to stand on the left side of the escalators, because in Romania we stand on the right side. Yep. The idea of this presentation is that we want to disseminate our findings. We concentrate on the flash floods, but the core of this project is based on three factors, which is heat waves, flash floods, and earthquakes. And these core factors are part of, let's say, a big project funded by the European Union. This project was won by the consortium led by Delft University, and our university is also part of it, alongside civil engineering companies and city councils. So we are proud to be part of this Horizon project funded by the European Union. I also work with the other 2 people that are in the slide you see there, Costache Romulus, which is the director of this project, the flash flood project for Tecuci, the city we analyze, and the other person, Nicu Ciubotaru, who is specialized in modeling, hydraulic modeling. Now, the background, why do we choose flash floods? Because in the past years, due to the climate changes, the frequency of the flash flood resulted in showers in May and June in Romania, but also snow melting. So the flash floods increased in the past years, and this phenomena produces high damages on settlements, and it is very unpredictable. Also, maybe you have heard in Europe what happened in Valencia region, where more than 200 people died because of flash floods. So this is something that occurs very often in Romania. The city we analyze is Tecuci. It is actually not a city, but a town. It has 30,000 inhabitants. And we concentrate on a small catchment, which sometimes it is dry, it doesn't have a flow in the river floodplain, but the idea is that when you have showers, that little river could affect the settlements, which are very close by it. Also, if we decided that we should implement a flash flood warning service system in order to try and forecast and warn the authorities. The objective is make hydraulic modeling, implement hazard maps, inform, disseminate the findings, and disseminate this to the local authorities, to the institutions, for example, the National Hydrology institutions, to the emergency units that intervene. There are specialized units called the inspectorates that intervene. Most of them are firefighters specialized also in intervening when floodings occur. So they, based on these maps, they receive any information. They could come up later with a plan, including, for example, routing from their emergency center to the affected areas, and we're going to talk about that later on. You can see there the system architecture, and we have the hydraulic and hydrological modeling. Then we have the hazard and risk assessment. So this is mainly done by multiple factors like hydraulic mapping and identifying the risk areas based on, for example, the materials that the buildings are composed of, the roads, the quality of the roads. So in this way we can determine the vulnerable areas, and also the dissemination. At the beginning we have decided to implement an email service. There is a service in Romania where people receive via an SMS, for example, that beware in your area there could be flash flood, for example, or flooding, but the data received is insufficient. We are planning in sending information with detailed maps of affected areas, even the number of settlements that will be affected and when it will occur, etc. There are multiple models used to predict and to forecast the situation that occurs. These models, in terms of hydrological models, can be run continuously, and also this is done by my colleague Nicolae-Cristian. You can see there the names of the models used. Based on this, we can determine the river discharge. We can determine the runoff resulted from the rains, for example, or from the showers, or when the snow melts. Moving forward to hydraulic modeling, of course we use, and I've seen people here talking about HECRAS, we can use this to determine the flooded area, for example, the surface. Moreover, you can determine the velocity, so the speed of it, the depth of the flooded area. Of course, taking into consideration, for example, the roughness of the terrain, using, for example, Manning's equation. Also, we can obtain high-resolution maps that can be used further to determine the risk. The hazard assessment, you can see there many GI pixels there, so that the length of the pixel is 100 meters in, let's say, real mapping. We can see that if something is with red, then it means that that area is vulnerable based on, let's say, the building, the materials that are used, how close are those buildings to the rivers, the number of stories, so we consider them more vulnerable in comparison with others. Also, we have taken into consideration the fact that the return probability is from 0–1%, so this could, let's say, once in 1,000 years, to 10%, so very often. The ones that are 0.1%, of course, have a very high impact on the municipality, on the town. And you can see there surfaces ranging from, let's say, 2 to 7 square kilometers. And most of the areas would occur, of course, closer to the rivers. One of the rivers is located towards the east, or moving north to south, and the other, Tecucel, is located to the west, and it flows into the main river that flows from north to south. But in our project, we analyze the small river that I was telling you about. The risk assessment we have obtained, you can see there percentages of how areas are affected based on the quality of the buildings, for example, and the risk in total we can be determined based on hazard multiplied by exposure. Hazard meaning the phenomena itself, the flooding, and the exposure meaning, as I was telling you, about the quality of the building, of the buildings, the surface of them, when they were built. For example, if we are talking about historical buildings, which are present here in this small town, then of course they are more vulnerable. Now, the warning system and dissemination. It is very important to note that the digital elevation model is used for the flooding, and the more the smaller the pixels are. For example, this one has around 25 meters, the pixel size. But if you have smaller sizes of the pixel, then the more precise you have the flooding, the flood models. You can do a more precise risk assessment, and of course, this is more helpful for the early warning systems. Now, we have set up 4 color palettes, let's say from yellow to violet. Violet meaning the one that shows that intervention needs to occur prior to the event. So the area was going to be affected by the floods and by the flash floods in the following days. And yellow means, for example, that there could be flooding in the, let's say, yards of the settlements, but the economical activities would not be affected that much. So normal activities, daily activities could continue. It is important to note here that after disseminating this, we can tell the authorities if, for example, if you have a flash flood with a high velocity, let's say a pylon of a bridge is destroyed, so the intervention trucks could not cross it, right? Then we have the option to reroute, so using GIS. And in this way, the intervention units could plan this and make scenarios based on our findings. And yes, this is very helpful for them because today there is no such service available at the county, let's say county area. And of course, we can include what areas are affected, as I was showing you before with the pixels. We can include how long the flood would last, and not only we can recommend what they can do. For example, if they want to evacuate the population from a certain area, they can be moved to areas that cannot be flooded in the following days. What is important to remember from this presentation is that this type of approach, which is a pilot, let's say, approach that we're doing now, can be transferred to towns that have the same population, or the layout of the land is comparable. For example, if you have a tributary river flowing into another main river, like this situation we have here, You can see there on your top right-hand side. On the left, you can see flooded areas, and on the right, there are speeds for the specific roads based on the quality of the road, right? So based on that, we can calculate how much time from point A to point B it takes for a truck or for a car to go and intervene. So we have multiple approaches here that we can use, and of course, we can improve whilst we're working. We use here, so we're now in the phase of improving the project, and there are scripts that are run by the team, and we are automatizing everything. So they can receive it. The email will contain, for example, the flooded map recommendations, for example, recommendation for the local population, if they should leave the premises or if they should stay there. Recommendation for the local authorities, if they need to evacuate or not. For example, if we have code red, then there is most likely that the population will be evacuated. It is the same thing that's done in the case of earthquakes, because this city also encounters earthquakes. That analysis being done by the National Physics Institute in Bucharest, and we work together with them. Another important thing in this project is to note how cooperation with and how important is that the local council needs to be open in this situation, and we had very good cooperation with this city council in Tecuci, and that's why it is one of the cities that was chosen in our analysis. So the early warning system is not perfect, of course, but it's better than what the local community has now, besides those SMS notifications and a map that shows, that names only areas that have flooding risk, but that's it. They do not tell you when the flooding occurs, on which month, the duration, etc. While this is real-time monitoring and can be applied not only in this city, but especially in areas located in higher plains where flash floods can occur with smaller, narrow rivers like this one that most of the year are dry, but when flash floods occur, they can affect the surrounding settlements. I can tell you one thing. For example, this small river, the distance between it and the Talweg, right? Let's say the smallest area and the deepest area of the river, I want to say, and buildings, let's say under 15 meters. So when there's a big discharge, it affects the buildings there. We have also a station where we monitor the velocity of the river and the depth of the river. So in this way, we can validate our data. This is done on a daily basis. And if flooding occurs, we can validate this with the prognosis, the forecast from the National Institute of Hydrology. So we can make a better model and better maps in order to inform the authorities. This is it. If you have any questions.
Thank you very, very much for that presentation. It was really, really interesting. I guess just really quickly, the first question I've got for you is,
please.
is whether or not it's currently operationalized. Is this something that's in use and the local council is using at the moment? Or?
Yes, so the local council can view the data from the station, and it is we are building it to be automatized. and the deadline for it's going to be December next year. But the idea is that we have the raw data, this is live, and we can actively view it. By the end of 2027, we're going to have like an application where we can view maps showing the affected areas that then we can send to the local authorities. But right now we are in the process of going there.
Any other questions? All right, I've got one over here.
Thanks for that. I'm interested to know how far out you issue your warnings.
Well, let's say maybe the prognosis, like to be more precise, could be 1 or 2 days before the event. So for example, if it's gonna be a flooding, supposedly gonna be tomorrow, then today we're gonna inform the authorities that could happen. Right now, the information is maybe 1 hour before. And this is, as I told you, done via the SMS. But based on the rain, the amount, we can see if it increases faster, then we can, let's say, predict quicker than what's now, especially for this area.
Cool, thanks. Just a supplementary question. So given that you're trying to predict a couple of days out, there's quite a lot of uncertainty around that. How do you deal with false alarms?
Well, that's why we're trying to calibrate this as good as possible today. So we're gonna decide on that in the following, let's say, year.
I'm just wondering, what is the typical response time for a flood in this area in terms of the validity of warning? And secondly, you mentioned some weather modelling inputs, which is your days ahead forecast, but are there also radar, rain gauge, river stage? Are these inputs to the model as well?
Yes, we have. So we have one of our colleagues is working at the National Institute of Hydrology, so he's using the radar. So for example, based on rain, we can determine the runoff of and then the flow of the river. Sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
The first part was,
the first part.
What is the typical response time for a flood in this area in terms of a useful warning?
So you mean...
how rapidly the waters rise as a function of a delay from the onset?
So the idea is that if there's going to be an increase, then we can talk a matter of hours, not many hours, until that level that affects the settlements going to be reached. So for example, there was an analysis not on this river, but we had the flash flood on another river. So based on the hydrometer that we had the following days, we can see that the increase was 1 hour. So of course, there's a very high uncertainty on it. That's why we're working on it to build let's say, a better system than what we have now based on radar, based on the station that we have there, so we can determine using HEGRAS and other models, so we can determine the affected areas. Based on historical data, there are multiple factors we take into account, and these are, let's say, used by my colleagues mostly than by me, because, for example, I'm responsible in analyzing the traffic, the service area, the intervention of the emergency units, rather than this. So this is an information they could answer better than me right now.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, one right here.
Hello, I'm Michelle from eWaters. I'm
Hello.
doing hydraulic modeling. I want to ask whether there's any trade-off between the size of the grids and also the simulation time, because you mentioned the 25 meters of the HEGRAS model, and I would imagine whether that's sufficient for an urban road or something.
No, that's not sufficient, but we also have moved to, so we used also 5 meter pixel, so that's more precise. But the models you see there were used for 25 meters, and the others we are, let's say we are trying to get a better digital elevation model to obtain a much better flooding distribution right now. So again, we are in the process of, the deadline for this is next year, so.
Kia ora, thanks. Ali Osborne from Wellington Water. I admit my question kind of extends or adds on to the other ones around timing, and particularly with hydraulic modelling, it's generally known to be pretty slow and so very difficult to operationalise in this sort of context. Is the vision that in the working system, the hydraulic model will always be run once you get your forecast, you run it through your rainfall runoff model, and then you run the hydraulic model as well? Or are you running the hydraulic model beforehand and sort of seeing what the event is closest to in terms of your...
Okay, so we are running on a real time the hydrological model where we can see, for example, we can determine the flow, the discharge. Based on that, we can then run the hydraulic model, and then if a threshold is exceeded, then we can send it to the authorities. The idea is that I know it is pretty slow and there are many things, it's very unpredictable. Imagine in the case of earthquakes what we have there. So, but that's why we are trying to make this more, in a way, user-friendly, right? Because as I was telling you about, the authorities and many of the other agencies that we have lack this information. So for what we have here is above what other counties have and what, how should I say, what was implemented until now. And that's why, for example, I'm here to learn more from this kind of conferences, so we can then implement there. And these types of projects that you see in Horizon, it's not only applicable for Romania, it's also applicable for Italy or the Netherlands, because they also do this kind of analysis, and they also have the same problem and limits because of this. Next, we need more investment here on stations that monitor not only, so we have one station that's upstream, right at the entrance in the city, on this small river. But we need one, the river, let's say, has 30 kilometers, so we need one even up, right? So if we have one 30 kilometers away, we can see the level increasing high there. We can determine that they have high precipitation there. So downstream, we could estimate that, let's say, in how many minutes there's going to be a huge flood, which doesn't happen now. They inform you that there is a flood after it happened. So.
Thank you very much for that. We've run out of time for questions, but I'm sure Christian would love to take more questions after the session at the breakout afterwards. Could everyone join me in thanking Christian for his presentation?
Thank you.
Give people just a couple of minutes to redistribute. Okay, we're going to get get started with our next session in this stream. So the title of this paper is Hybrid Machine Learning Modelling for Rapid Flood Scenario Assessment. And it's going to be presented by Andrea Estivariz from our Environmental. I think Brad's going to do a bit of an introduction as well on that. So I'll let Brad from our Environmental kick it off. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for coming along this afternoon in such a large theatre. It's a little bit daunting standing up here, and that didn't help, but we'll get going. So today, Awa is supporting Andrea with presenting the results of her PhD research that she finished successfully last year. So she started with us in January. So her work's on hybrid methods for flood and scenario assessment. And what's important about this work is making flood assessment information made faster while still keeping it grounded in physical modelling and understanding of catchment dynamics. So this is the hybrid concept that Andrea will speak to you about today. So the talk is framed around why speed matters, what was built and how it may be useful. And the question about speed matters has probably been touched on a number of times at Stormwater conferences with how long computations take. So this research directly responds to that problem and explores combining physics-based modelling with machine learning to create a faster way of estimating flood depths and extents. So the focus is not on replacing models, but on using them where they're most important, which is where for critical scenario analysis. So just a small shameless plug around Awa. So we're focused on kind of 3 core services and capabilities around modelling, planning, and engineering. And so we would bring those 3 things together. I run what we call the Digital Environments Group at Awa, which is made up of what I call catchment dynamics people, which are kind of sciencey engineering people, spatial people that understand how water moves through catchments, growth pressures, infrastructure, and the like. And then also digital solutions people who do software development, automation, and people aren't fit in one box, and sometimes they move between the two. So with no more, I will pass on to Andrea to walk you through an interesting piece of work that's she's taken a number of years to complete successfully.
Thank you very much, Brad, for that. Okay, so today we are going to talk about one of the projects I was working during my PhD. We will start with the why, what pushed this research, then we will go through the research project itself, including methods and results, and then we will finish framing it in a practice context, what is relevant, and discussing where it can help. So let's start with the context. So most of us, we probably know already that, but flooding is the most frequent hazard in New Zealand and the most costly weather-related. So a large population of New Zealand lives on active floodplains. On the top of this, we know that flooding frequency and intensity is changing due to climate change and not for the best. So yeah, we all know it's bad. So Ernst New Zealand led a 5-year research program that included many different stakeholders from the private and the public sector, and which had this objective, and developing a system to map consistently flood hazard across the whole country. So my PhD was framed within the first research aim, national flood mapping, and it was a collaboration project between Ernst New Zealand, or it used to be NIWA, UC, University of Canterbury, and then GeoCean in Spain. And a few research papers came out of that, and the one we are presenting today, it's published in the Journal of Flood Risk Management. So now we are going to talk about the specific motivation that drove this project. So if we want robust flood information, we use 2D hydrodynamic models. However, these models are computationally expensive. So this causes issues and makes it difficult to carry out ensemble flood scenario analysis, flood prediction system. This really ties with the previous talk, so yeah. In the last years, we have been increasingly hearing a lot about artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, blah, 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 and how these techniques can actually be used for flood hazard prediction. In this project, we are using a hybrid method. By hybrid, I mean a combination of 2 different methodologies to leverage the advantages of each. In this case, we are going to be combining traditional physics-based modeling, which we know and trust, but with machine learning to see if we can build a more computationally efficient methodology for rapid flood hazard assessment. So let's introduce our study site. This one is the Wairewa catchment. It's down in the Banks Peninsula in the South Island, close to Christchurch. It has 85 square kilometers and a funnel shape, so it's like high hills. And then in the middle, in the floodplain, we have the little river town. So it floods frequently from pluvial and fluvial flooding. And it's important to say that we work in conjunction with the Wairewa Runanga to look together for sustainable solutions, long-term solutions for the flooding issue. So now, well, some flooding photos. And now we are going to go into the methods, hopefully not too boring. So the main objective, big objective, is to build a method for rapid flood hazard assessment. So how we are going to do this? So we are going to use the main inundation driver, rainfall, and then the geographic characteristics of the catchment, and then we are going to put it into the Heartbeat model, and then it's going to give us inundation map without having to do the hydrodynamic process, which is, as we said, computationally expensive. So keeping this objective in mind, what we need to do this is data. So this data breaks into two blocks. The first one is predictor data, predictor variables, so what we used to predict, in this case, storms, rainfall, and geographic characteristics. And then we have target variables, so what are we actually predicting, in this case, inundation. And we broke this into two to answer two different questions. So first, flood, non-flood data, which answer the question, does the location flood? And we can assess through a classification model. And then we have depth, maximum inundation depth, that answers the question, how much do we flood? That we can solve through a regression model. So this is the data that the machine learning model needs. So once we have our data, we can train the machine learning model and see if we can do the same job as the hydrodynamic model. So we need the hydrodynamic model to generate that data. So let's go a bit into the predictors. So when we started working into this, we had a problem. Only one rain gauge in the catchment, not great data. What do? So here we decided to use a rainfall graded dataset produced by a numerical model. And I know sometimes people don't trust them, but we actually validated against the rain gauge network, and it does a good job representing heavy rainfall statistics, so we are using this model. And however, the model has only 20 years of time span, again, not enough. So this is where we use statistical methods based on a Monte Carlo approach to generate our own data set of storms based on the storms that we found in our graded rainfall product produced by the numerical model. The storms are going to be represented through 6 parameters, and this is important, even though it sounds boring, because all the methods is based in parametrization. So all these complexities are explained through specific parameters or variables that it makes it easier. So for the storms, we are using 3 temporal parameters: duration, total storm precipitation, and peakness factor, just tell us how peaky the storm is. And then when it comes to spatial characteristics, we have 3 spatial parameters, which are called principal components, because they come from a statistical principal component analysis, but the only thing that you need to know is that they tell us where it rains. If it's blue, it means it rains more than the average precipitation in the catchment. Red, it means it rains less, and white, it just means it rains around the average. So these 3 statistical parameters gave us this rainfall spatial distribution, so we know where it rains more or less. And then we have geographic variables, which are relevant for us, for flood modelers, like slope, elevation, aspect, etc. Now we are going to jump into the target variables, the inundation maps. Okay, I don't think this is, okay, whatever. So to generate the inundation maps, we have our data set of storms. In this case, we were using 200 storms, but this number was a bit of a discussion, so we could be using less or more. This number works well for the Wairewa catchment, and we use BGFlood, which is an open source, fast 2D hydrodynamic model to generate the inundation maps. And there we go, now we have our target data. For each storm, we keep flood, no flood for its location, and also the maximum inundation depth. So this is all our data. There we go. Okay, so once we have our whole data, we can actually build the model and validate it. So there are so many machine learning algorithms out there, okay? But we were looking for one specific algorithm that was easy to implement, easy to use, that someone could actually try to understand, that it could be easy to understand, not a black box. So the first step was choosing the machine learning algorithm and then try to develop it. So to do that, we started with 4 different algorithms: random forest, stream gradient boosting, support vector machine, and radial basis function networks. And we tested them in 3 different locations before actually applying them in the whole floodplain of the catchment. The best performing algorithm was random forest. It was the one that was fast, accurate, and easy to set up. So it came to be the winner. For any model that we develop, the way of doing this is applicable even if you are doing a point test or if you are doing a model for the whole floodplain. It works the same way. You have all your data and you need to divide it in 3 sets. The first one is training, that you use to train the machine learning algorithm. The second one is testing, that you use it to optimize it. And then you have validation, which is data the algorithm never saw before. And you just put it at the end to see how the algorithm performs well, if we can actually do the same job as the hydrodynamic model. And this is just the criteria we use anytime to assess the performance of the model, which includes the accuracy, how fast it could make predictions, how much data we need to train. Some algorithms need less or more, and then the predictor variables. Do we need to actually use all of them, or we can just use 2 and it does a good job? So going to the results for the whole floodplain of the catchment, I'm going to show you here performance metrics. These values are like total averages, okay? But I mean, when you go into the detail of each case is when it gets trickier. But when it comes to the classification model, that answers the question, does this location flood? We use recall, precision, and F1 score. What you need to know about these ones is that they range between 0 and 1. If recall is less than 1, it means we are underestimating flood, so not great. Overestimating flood, so not great. But precision less than 1, it means we are overestimating flood. And then F1 is just harmonic beam between them. So here, if you look into the box plot that show main statistics of these performance metrics for test and validation, we can see that for most cases, the classification model does a pretty good job. When it comes to regression model, that answered the question, how much do we flood? So maximum inundation depth, we use root mean square error, and Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency. Again, overall, it does a good job, but here, instead of showing you on a case basis, storm basis, how it performs, I'm showing you maps, because the key thing here is that the model generally does a good job, but the performance does vary with location and storm, and that's important to consider. Okay, if we actually want to use the model, how do we do this? So if we have like a specific Eaton graph defined by our 3 temporal parameters and our rainfall spatial distribution pattern defined by our 3 spatial parameters that give this specific storm with this total storm precipitation field, we can either obtain the inundation maps through BGFlood, the 2D hydrodynamic model I was telling you about. This will take hours, or we can do it with a hybrid model with the already trained and optimized random forest algorithm, and then you can obtain the 2 inundation maps in less than a second. If we actually compare both, we can see that when it comes to predicting flood no flood, the model does a really good job, just some places upstream the lake where it says it's flooding, but it's not. And when it comes to maximum inundation depth, it does a reasonably good job. Again, underestimating flooding in this case, underestimating flooding upstream the lake. So now I'm going to, Brad and me, we're going to talk a bit about the contribution, how to frame this research project within the practice context. And here is when we go back to what Brad was talking about, why speed matters. Here we have been using physically informed modeling, which we know and we trust, and we have combined it with machine learning to try to build a method that allows us to do assessment of even hundreds of events really fast. And why is this important? It's because it takes hours to do one hydrodynamic simulation. And if we can use this method for a rapid screening, for a scenario prioritization, it can be combined with the modeling that we trust, physics-based modeling, to lead us, to help us to identify those critical scenarios that we need to prioritize and we can run at a higher, more detailed resolution. So the key takeaway is that we are not replacing here physics-based modeling. We are not doing that. We are simply introducing other methodologies to try to build more efficient workflows. And now Brad is gonna be talking more about the contribution of this research project.
So this is just a bit of a model of, I think of it as the world around us in stormwater and different sort of chunks of activity that happen all the time around us. And so there's a lot of planning. It doesn't just have to be consent planning. It can be stakeholder engagement, it can be studies, community engagement, assessments of effects, policy development, asset management, all the types of planning, catchment prioritisation. Designing, so actually designing things doesn't have to be engineering design. It can be landscape architecture. It could be many elements of design. Getting the idea through and ready for construction, and construction's reasonably obvious, and then operates in that sort of civil defence, maintenance, flood forecasting kind of space. So when we think about this methodology, this hybrid methodology. This planning, operations and design seems to be areas that it has application for. Andrea, the core application that you were using it for, what was that? That was within a planning context, was it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
To help the community make decisions around how to, for example, locate different key assets for the community.
Yeah, and so that last presentation was on operations space, and so we just wanted to sort of give a little bit of a frame of where this sort of methodology might have legs and might pop up again in some form in the future. So next steps.
Okay, I can go back to comment on this. Okay, talking about the next steps, I think it's important to talk about, okay, if we want to actually do this somewhere else, how can we actually do that? Okay, so we need data. We need storms and inundation maps, site-specific, and this is the big investment of these methods, that we need that initial time and computing effort, and this might look like different in another place, because, for example, we can have compound flooding, we need to include a tidal level, or we need to include antecedent conditions, but the way this methodology is framed is around parameterization, as I said, so we can represent those inundation drivers through a specific parameter, then we can put them inside the whole system really easily. Then, potentially, as I was commenting, more like in the practice context, try to test this model with actual rainfall forecasting data to see what we can get towards having an operational rainfall forecasting system. And then finally, potentially going more into higher resolution, because this is not that high resolution, it's 50 meters. So, okay, higher resolution would allow us to make like more specific decisions around like key assets. Thank you very much. You can read the paper there if you want, all the exciting technical details. And now we are happy to answer your questions.
There we go. Thank you very much for that presentation. There's a lot to take in, but it was really, really interesting. I'll just see if there's any questions. Oh, yeah, straight off the bat. There we go.
Jojo here. Awesome presentation and bit fun. Leaving aside the feasibility model for a level of confidence and acknowledging that there's no standardized benchmark to compare against other surrogate model. So, what's your opinion on the performance of this sort of surrogate model against other methodology like low fidelity hydrodynamic solver results for like larger grid, then downscale again for higher resolution, kind of like there are heaps of paper around that. So how would you think that will compare against those sort of different methods in terms of flood extent and depth?
You mean like doing this versus downscaling inundation maps, other approaches? Sorry, like for example, which other methodologies? You mean downscaling inundation maps, or what exactly?
Correct. So like first with the low fidelity hydrodynamic model, like quite
I see.
which is just pretty quick and
I actually did a bit of research on that while I was doing this. Like, okay, let's do a very coarse model and see if we can actually obtain high resolution maps. So our base is the hydrodynamic model outputs, and then maybe with physical information like the DM, LiDAR, blah, blah, we can actually obtain results. Didn't manage to do it, this worked better. Maybe in another situation it would. And something that is interesting is that when I try to use this model that is set for a 50 meters resolution for trying to obtain higher resolution outputs, just didn't work the same setup. It seemed like, it would have to be like retrain, which was quite interesting because I was hoping that maybe it could be more, I could reuse it, but no, it was not the case.
I'm just going to ask a quick question as well. When you were looking at the precision and recall statistics,
Yep.
did you delineate between areas that were flooded more frequently or less frequently? So as in like, how do you track the performance in the areas we're really interested in, like the low frequency floodplains?
Yes, that's really interesting in the paper, like how the performance really varies not only based on the storm. If some storms have more water comes down and it varies the performance, but also a lot based on the location. It was really interesting to see how, like in, for example, locations that rarely flood, the model also very rarely would say, hey, here we are flooding, which means we generally, if it actually floods, we will miss that. So it's interesting how, at the end, there is that underrepresentation in the training data, but it's also a reflection of reality. So these models are as good as your data, but at the same time, it's trickier, You try to have the most representative data set as possible, but these rare cases, it's complicated to miss, and the only way of capturing these patterns is going into the specific details in the different areas. Yeah.
Any other questions around here? Sorry, thank you. Sorry, I should get people to introduce themselves as well, so name and organisation.
Yes, sweet. Hey guys, really cool project.
Thank you.
I actually also created a LSTM flood model last year, combining physics with machine learning.
Oh, then we can talk about that.
With the University of Canterbury.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, Tim Wilson here from Becker. I understand you you made a rainfall runoff sort of linear model, or you intend to. How are you capturing the non-linearities of our complex environment?
Yeah, that's always the question. This is like rain on grid. So I didn't do like rainfall runoff. This is just like rain on grid modeling. Yeah, it's complicated because at the end you are like trying to use machine learning to replicate those physical complex processes and trying to learn from the data. But up to what point it does, I can't answer that question. But I don't think it's very clear. So you try to have like as many. What we try to do is like, okay, we know this. Our catchment was not specifically very complex from the hydrological point of view, but still have like a very different set of storms and inundation maps to try to capture all those small details and complexities. Still, I think it's complicated to try to emulate that. Yeah.
Cheers.
Any other questions out there?
Hi, I'm Kate from Tonkin and Taylor. I was wondering how much human input you'd need, how much time to make a model like this, and also how long it takes to train the model.
Yeah, that's a very important question. I can tell you about what I did here. When it comes to this model, the most consuming part was it's getting the data. In this case, 200 storms. It took me like a week more or less to run the 200 storms and have 2 inundation maps to have the model, the machine learning ready to be trained. So that's not like that much. Random forest is quite fast to train. It will take me maybe to do like a round of training 5 minutes. And a regular computer. I'm not talking, the point was like to also use like available software using like regular computers, not having to everything be hosted in a supercomputer. But you need to do maybe a bit of iterating. I was also learning the process. I think now it would be faster, but not much, actually.
So you're sort of saying weeks, not years?
Oh, yes, like 2 weeks once. Yeah.
Good, Andrea. Ali Osborne from Wellington Water here, and we spoke a couple of years ago at the modelling symposium about some thing, which was very interesting then too. I'm curious, you mentioned something about whether some parameters would fall out in terms of their importance in the training data. Did you find that any of the parameters you began with became irrelevant and not applicable?
Yes, definitely. That was part of the optimization process. Like at the beginning, I just dumped everything, and then I realized that it really depends on the classification model of the regression model. But I do remember that for the classification model, we then used, for example, the total wetness index, because it was actually dropping down the performance of the model. And some of them were like not very relevant. They were like, but if we get rid of them, doesn't really impact. So that was an interesting thing, that we didn't need that much data actually.
And do you think they would change with different catchments?
I would hope that for a similar catchment, that with similar flow dynamics, it could be quite similar, but of course, like in different catchments, yes, probably.
Okay, I think there might be time for one more question if someone's got a burning question. Otherwise, we can leave it there and give people. Oh, you've got one, sorry, go on.
Hey, I'm Kawal from Horowena District Council. Just wondering, have you compared your results, or have you done like a similar exercise where you compared your results with an existing modelling from like two-flow or other, sort of a conventional?
No, we don't have funding for that. This is a research open source model.
Okay.
The flow is too expensive for this. We can't.
It's a great answer.
I wish, though. That would be really interesting.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking Andrea and Brad again.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of minutes to redistribute for the next session. For those of you who have just arrived, welcome to the Flood Forecasting and Data Insights stream. We've got a presentation now from Kaya Deventer-Hollands from Auckland Council. So Kaya is an environmental scientist and hydrologist at Auckland Council, specialising in freshwater systems, stormwater management and nature-based flood mitigation.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kaya Hollands tōku ingoa, no te konihira o Tamaki Makaurau ahau. So I'm here today to share with you Auckland Council's journey in setting up an operational stormwater network monitoring solution, which utilises computer vision technology. So I'd like to start by sharing some context on the problem that we set out to address. Auckland Council currently has 338 known critical flooding hotspots. And these are all sites where the capacity of our network is limited and the debris loading from upstream poses an accentuated risk to flooding in downstream residences and roadways. These critical locations are mostly at the interface between pipes and channeled stream, open stream sections, culverted sections, although similar issues can occur at scruffy domes, pond outlets, and bridge underpasses. Stormwater assets here are vulnerable to blockage and so require active maintenance attention. The map on the left shows the distribution of these sites across our northern, central, and southern operational areas. And in the past, our ops teams have visited these sites on a monthly roster, with scheduled sites ensuring that these assets are kept clear of debris to the best of their team's abilities. There's also a subset of this list which is deemed to be higher risk, and they're reactively checked pre and post significant rain. Given this highly active maintenance schedule and low tolerance for delays, the intelligence unit at Healthy Waters has developed a tool to assist. So our proposed uplift to Auckland Council's Stormwater Operations Service model was in developing a network of remotely accessible and auto-generated insights at these locations. Currently we have 85 AI-enabled camera systems installed at the critical hotspot locations, and we'll be scaling this up to 108 by mid-2026. The slide shows the physical infrastructure deployed at each site, including a pole, solar panel, and a 4K infrared trail cam. And each camera updates the database with a new image every 3 hours, both day and night, and this offers a status check of accumulated debris via a trained neural network model. The technology solution that we've invested in is currently shared with our stakeholders in 3 formats. We've developed the live status map, the last image gallery shown on this slide, alongside SMS alerting and email-based alerting on asset status, as well as insights at each asset location. The last image gallery on the right was proven very useful to civil defence in confirming ground conditions across the region in real time during rainfall events. So now I'd like to just share a case study, an example of how this technology has aided in a fast response to a request for service during ex-tropical cyclone Tam on Easter 2025. So pictured on the right is the Stoddard Road Grill. And as you can see in this map, this asset is surrounded by industrial buildings and staff car parks, prone to flooding if this asset were to block during subsequent heavy rain. During this event, the catchment observed 111 millimetres of rain over 4 hours, with intensities around 80 millimetres per hour. Our hotspot camera first observed debris at the grill at 6 a.m. when the floodwater started to recede. And between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. that afternoon on the same day, the debris were clear and the asset was back to normal functioning ahead of the next rain to come. So this proactive response is something that our ops teams can be proud of, and near real-time insights in this case contributed to making the community feel safer. The rollout of the hotspot camera network has been necessarily gradual and considered. So for Auckland Council's investment into a novel tech solution, it was deemed appropriate to test out the technology options, the approach, and also to develop relationships with key suppliers handling different aspects of the workflow. For example, the cameras, the poles, mounting designs, network providers, machine learning model frameworks, and visualization platforms, with each partner having a different part to play. So the hotspot camera project started back in 2019 in October with just 3 cameras and an inspired outcome of 1 image per day being sent back to us. Following a strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats analysis, it was decided that we would add an extra 20 sites and trial a machine learning computer vision model. From around 2023, Auckland Council supported development of an additional 100 cameras across 2 distinct phases. With all things considered, each site costs about $10,000 to develop, but now that we have a scaled operational network, the emphasis has shifted slightly from new site planning to refinement and to socialising this data and the insights to the likes of Auckland Emergency Management and Stormwater Operations. But that being said, there still needs to be a level of trust in the machine learning model to enable a direct flow of the status updates to the contractor who will be doing the clearing works. So this infrastructure that we've deployed at each site has been intentionally standardised, and the decision was made in order to make maintenance activities easier, as well as to remove variability in the model training workflow. The photos on the left show our physical infrastructure deployed at each site, and that's consisting of a 4K infrared and RGB trail cam, the solar panel, and a pole mounting system. And on the right you can see the mapped locations that we have currently generating insights. So the journey with the machine learning model framework also continued to grow in stages. And initially in phase 1, the system generated classifications by applying a trained classifier to fix image patch crops. These crops were used to determine the drain's state and to ascertain whether it was blocked, partially blocked, clear, or flooded. The classifier itself was built using a ResNet 50 convolutional neural network model, and this was trained on 128 by 128 pixel patches. These patches were extracted from fixed coordinates, which had to be predefined for each site and stored in the processing database. However, this approach had some clear limitations. If the pole or the camera view had moved slightly, or if vegetation had grown up and blocked the view, the model would often produce incorrect classifications. So to address these issues in phase 2, we moved to an object detection approach, and we implemented a YOLO-based convolutional neural network. This model was trained on annotating bounded boxes, where each box included both the location of the drain and the state as a class label. As a result, the system could now dynamically locate the drain and classify its status at the same time. And this removed the need for the fixed coordinates and made the solution a lot more robust with changing conditions and across different sites. The new model architecture delivered a significant improvement in the accuracy that we were seeing, and there were a few key changes behind this. So as I was saying, we removed the simple classifier and moved to an object detection model approach. This meant that the system was predicting the drain status, but also finding the drain within the image. Secondly, we introduced a separate model solely to detect the flooding, because in previous, if the floodwaters were higher and the drain was blocked, it would create model confusion based on the training that was done. And so thirdly, we improved the training data pipeline as well and increased the volume of images that was fed to each camera site. And that led to better quality data and more consistent model performance. So as a result, we saw an 18% increase in the accuracy, improving from around 80% to 98% with the new object detection model. The higher the threshold, the less likely the model is to incorrectly classify the status of the drain, but more likely it is to entirely miss it. And so higher thresholds will guarantee less false positive alarms, while potentially missing alarms that they should have called. And sometimes this can be called overfitting in modelling. And so let's talk about that. So while the current object detection approach has improved the performance, there are still some key challenges ahead of us. Firstly, the model requires training data that covers each possible drain state, which can be difficult and time-consuming to capture. Secondly, it doesn't generalize particularly well, so every new camera location requires additional data collection and retraining, and the embedding time that we've allowed is usually like 1 to 2 months, where we capture multiple states of the drain. And finally, there's a heavy reliance on manual annotation, so different sites will have different thresholds for blockage. And if these requirements change, the annotators have to go back and mark which images would constitute a blockage, which can be quite time-consuming. So, yeah, while effective, the current approach still requires a lot of effort to maintain and scale. But looking ahead, we're exploring 2 potential options to improve the system further. The first is what we would call the blockage sizing approach, and instead of segmenting everything, we would focus the object detection model just on detecting the drain and then segmenting the debris within it. From there, we can use the size of that debris in terms of the pixels in the coverage to determine the level of blockage based on thresholds that are set for each site. Tools like SAM3 can help generate masks efficiently, and then we can train lighter weight models like YOLO V9 on top of that. The second approach is a bit more comprehensive. This involves segmenting multiple elements within the image, including the drain, the water, debris, and the trash, and then measuring how much of the drain is covered. Using site-specific methods, we can classify the drain state accordingly. However, this approach does rely on having a clear baseline view of the drain to start with. Both approaches aim to reduce manual effort and improve scalability while maintaining or improving the accuracy. So currently our process works like this. So every 3 hours an image is captured on a schedule. The image is then analysed by the trained convolutional neural network model that determines the drain status. The image, along with the status update, is then sent to Auckland Council's operations teams in AEM, and from there requests for services can be raised, enabling a more proactive and risk-based approach to asset management. In terms of the alarm system, we're using a 0.75 confidence threshold, which is to mean that if the model's confidence is 0.75 or higher, an alert is triggered. If it's below 0.75, no alert is sent, even if the model has detected a potential blockage or flooding event. This approach assures that alerts are only generated when the model has high confidence in its prediction, which significantly reduces false alarms entering the system. Importantly, this threshold is configurable, so if we needed, we could adjust it to make the system more sensitive, or if we're finding that it's not producing enough alerts or missing. In the near future, we will look to push status alerts directly to the contractor, but for now we're still in the process of refining alerting and building stakeholder confidence in the automated approaches. We'll be adding a manual image request function to the project as well, so that people can request images outside of the 3-hourly scheduled image. This will allow for real-time insights and, I guess in the AEM context, a check in between scheduled images. This will have to be balanced with the data storage and cellular plan constraints in our current network. So quickly on the potential efficiency savings brought by this project. This table aims to standardise operational hotspot inspection costs across the 3 ops areas based on level of 20 to 30 inspection cycles per year. So on that basis, the total annual spend on critical inspections sits between roughly $300,000 and $500,000 a year for the 338 sites. If we assume that the hotspot camera monitoring is deployed at all of these sites and delivers a conservative 50% reduction in the inspection activity, that would translate to the potential efficiency savings of $175,000 to $250,000 a year. So overall, this snapshot provides a view of both the current cost and the scale of opportunity brought by the project. And beyond the financial impact, there's also important non-financial benefits that support council operations and ratepayers. These include proactively preventing flooding by identifying and addressing blockages earlier, effectively reducing the risk of downstream property damage and flooding. Monitoring in this way also provides greater peace of mind for communities in historically flood-prone areas, where visibility and assurance of asset function is very important. And more broadly, these tools support council and AEM's reputation and level of service to communities by enabling a greater situational awareness during flood events, and as well as enabling proactive approach to managing flood risk. So just briefly, I wanted to touch on the vandalism risks that we've faced to date. So to date, we've had 15 sites vandalised that haven't been reinstalled, and 7 that we reinstalled based on their criticality. So when deciding whether to reinstall, we take a risk-based approach, and the main factors that we would consider would be how critical the monitoring insight is, as well as how the site can be redesigned to reduce vandalism risk, and whether adding signage could help to deter the interference. We also look at repeat incidences, and if a site has been vandalised multiple times, then we would reconsider to reinstall there. With the number of sites we've installed so far, we're also been continuously learning and refining our approach to site design. We've run a series of workshops with the relevant teams to gather feedback and share insights, particularly on how the camera's set up, like the angle and the height and the distance from the asset, and how this impacts monitoring accuracy and data. From that, we're starting to see some clear patterns. For our current camera setup, detection accuracy is optimized when the camera is positioned within 15 meters of the asset and roughly a 60-degree viewing angle. We're also factoring in vandalism mitigation as part of our site design, along with using 4K cameras and both infrared and RGB capability. In some sites, we've added the infrared light extender as well to increase visibility in the nighttime images. And of course, landowner approval remains a key requirement for us, building a partnership with landowners and offering up data to them as well from the cameras. So to close my talk, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to Auckland Council's supplier partners for their help on this project. I feel like it's been a highly collaborative effort, and it feels like we're building something with a very strong future, a solution that can reduce costs to ratepayers while also improving public safety and delivering better environmental outcomes. So thank you for listening, and I'd like to now open for any partai.
Thank you, Kaya. That was really, really good, really thorough. Actually, you answered all the questions that I gathered up. They all got answered really neatly at the end. So, do we have any other questions in the audience? Oh, here we go.
Hi, thank you. My name is Anthony from Auckland Council. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very well. Just 2 questions. One is how sensitive are those drainage get blocked? And second question is is there a multiple line of defense before it get blocked? You spread out the obstacle and to capture more debris?
I guess our operations teams and our design engineers are thinking about how they design these grills to limit risk, sizing pipes as well, and so that's from the get-go. But in terms of the sensitivity, these are already identified as high-risk sites that block frequently, and that's insight that we've gathered over years. And so we've chosen these ones to install these at. I guess, yeah, this helps to know when they're blocked in real time and act upon that. I guess looking at the debris load and the rubbish in the catchment upstream as well, proactively clearing that rather than just what's accumulated on the grill. So it could be those things as well.
Thanks, Kaya, for the presentation. Really good to see that. I'm Dean from Auckland Council Healthy Waters. Sorry, friendly fire. No, genuinely curious. You mentioned focusing more on efficiency rather than increasing number of sites. Could you, because I get asked by people, can we add a hotspot camera in the pipe here? Can you talk a bit more around that thinking in terms of more cameras?
Yeah, I think we've got to a point now where there's a network and it shows a good spatial coverage of the region. So, I mean, that's really useful in AEM's context because they can see on the ground impacts and the level of the water. Adding more, yeah, I mean, that's probably in our future, continually adding to this network or replacing ones that have been vandalised. But we have to be really clear on the reason why we've put these in, and also what we're training the model to detect. If we stray away from that, or we go to different parts of the river or the stormwater network, then the machine learning model that we've designed won't work as well because it will be trying to do too much at once. So that's sort of some of the rationale of why I've said maybe we'll consider it in the future rather than put one in straight away.
Peter Christensen from Storm Environmental. Thank you very much, Kyle. It was really good to see the progress through to deployed. A couple of questions. One is, what's the operational costs per year per site? And also transferability to other areas. Is this something that you think can be transferred to other areas in New Zealand?
Cool. Yeah, I did calculate the cost for, I guess, the capital investment for installing it plus a little bit of the running, but I only have the total for both of them. I can get that to you if you find me afterwards and we trade email. But yeah, about 10,000 per site, and that's all inclusive of the dashboard, the machine learning model training, the physical infrastructure, and then the land approvals process and all of it. And sorry, what was the other question? Oh, yes, that's right. No, I think it's highly transferable. It could be done, all over New Zealand, or at least in the cities it would have some useful application, and outside of New Zealand as well. So it's, I think the training you'd probably pay to do it like within the region, or be considerate of the types of debris and debris loads that the catchment would have. So I think in like a forestry catchment where there's slash and sediment and that coming down, it would be quite a different training bias to an urban stream with those sort of contaminants and debris. So considering that, but the general workflow and the decisions made could be implemented all around the country.
Sorry, just a comment. So on the list of assets that we had, it used to be a storm event was predicted. The contractors would head out to these areas, check if they were, take a photo, check if they were clean. If they weren't clean, clean it, leave, come back afterwards, do the same thing. So this is them not needing to go to site unless there's something there to clear. And that's where the savings are related to.
So what's the potential to sort of like share to open data for your training data set? Is there any potential around that? Like some people share some useful data on cargo computations and, so that people can play around with their own model?
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I guess Auckland Council collecting data, it's usually under the premise of a particular purpose, and so if we were to share it in open data, we'd have to see around data governance there and whether that was appropriate. But I support open data generally, and I think if it was a possibility, I'd like to do it. So thanks for the prompt.
Hi, Ben Fountain from Our Environmental. Just building on that question, I regularly deal with communities who get out in the middle of the night and clear their own grills. Any requests from the public to have access to this so that they can see what's going on and make decisions around what they want to do?
Yeah, there has been requests. At the moment, we've constrained it to being an internal operational tool, and with the exception that if the camera's on the landowner's property, then we could give them access to images over an event or on a request. But yeah, I think there's a potential for privacy violations if we share it far and wide and that sort of thing. Although saying that, we design each site so it's primarily looking straight at the drain and pretty boring image otherwise, so very task focused.
Hi, thanks for that. It's Bruce Happily. I'm working with Marlborough District Council. Just a comment about vandalism. It may be a high-risk strategy for you. If you had a second camera on the pole that pointed the other way, with a sign saying "Smile, you're on camera," would that shut a few people down? Motion sensor, so it goes off if I come and fiddle with things, so I know I'm on camera. What do you reckon?
Yeah, we considered that. I mean, you're going to double up the costs pretty quick with that approach. But no, we've also had someone take the camera, and because it's sort of battery powered with its own juice, still capturing imagery. So you sort of see them in the car, and they go on a bit of a journey. So there's been that a few times. But yeah, I don't know if that would fully solve the issue. I think with the drive for it, they'll still tinker with it.
We're just going to do one last question.
Just on top of that, dummy cameras for you, $10 each, 2 of them.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much